Hey guys, it is Miss Forbes and I am back again with another video, and today I want to talk about just some tips for teaching lynching. Okay, teaching about lynching in your history classes. So right now, my students and we just finished up a unit 6. Typically that's going to be your industry and reform. So because of the time periods, which we focus in on the late 1800s, early 1900s. One of the things that I always tell them is there are always so many different things going on in history at the same time, right? But that is the unit, when we talk about industry and reform, that we also talk about lynching in America. Now, I teach in Virginia, and so our standards this year have been revised to include a lot more information, especially when it comes to lynching. Like, it has its own SOL standard and everything now. So, it's a little different, a lot more information than we typically taught. And this has been, this week was my first week teaching the new content that is included on lynching. And so I kind of just wanted to share my experience and kind of some tips for teaching lynching and some resources that have helped me to be able to teach this in a manner that is appropriate and effective. I'm a high school teacher, but a lot of the things and methods that are done at the high school level can also be adapted to the middle school level with just, of course, some tweaking. And so today, when I'm talking, I'm going to be coming from the perspective of a high school history teacher and just kind of share my perspective and things like that. So just a couple of tips. The first tip that I would give is making sure that when you start to teach about lynching in the United States, that you provide a definition. Okay, so for our state standards, the definition for lynching is: lynching was the illegal killing of people by gangs of violent vigilantes. Okay, so that is a more general definition. Now, I always then go forward and break it down, right? Yes, this was, illegal killings of people by gangs of violent vigilantes. And oftentimes, we know most of the time, those people were African Americans, more so particularly in the South, even though lynchings occurred all across the United States at this time, all right? Also, one of the things that you may want to do, and this is kind of tip number 2, is highlight who else would be targets, okay? So this is kind of an example of how I would explain this to my students, all right? I would say, we know that African Americans in the South were oftentimes targets, most of the time targets, for lynchings, these murders and brutal, displays of violence against African Americans. But why? The goal of lynching is to intimidate. It is to keep the African American male voting population at this time from advancing in politics from a voting perspective and office holding perspective, but also to restrain African Americans from becoming active and participating citizens in the democratic process, okay? Other people who would be targets of lynching, believe it or not, it wasn't just African Americans, but some accused whites were also subject to lynching, and here's why, okay? A lot of the lynchings that are done in the Deep South oftentimes are going to be done by white Southern Democrats, okay? I'm not saying all white people, all right? We're keeping it specific to this time period and in this context. If you want to talk 1880 and on to about 1918, somewhere in that era, Southern white Democrats, angry white mobs, white supremacists, those who did not want to see African Americans advance in certain areas. These, oftentimes people only think that it's the KKK. These are your teachers. These are your policemen. These are your local community members, the grocery store owner in these communities. These are the people who are perpetuating these violences amongst others as well. So it's not just the Ku Klux Klan, but they're also targeting white people who are friends with African Americans or who are Republicans, okay? Because during this time, African Americans were Republicans and voted Republican. And white Southern Democrats are not going to like that. So, of course, they don't want, blacks to have the right to vote because they don't want the Republican Party, especially in the South, to have any control in the houses of Congress or the local governments or anything like that. One example of this disenfranchisement of African American males as it relates to this category is the Wilmington Insurrection in the 1880s out in Wilmington, North Carolina. North Carolina was a state that saw a lot of black political involvement as far as, male political involvement. And they were holding these different offices, like the mayor, local positions, and angry white supremacists who decided that they didn't want to be governed by these black men. They actually violently and illegally removed these men from public office. All right, illegal because these are offices that men were elected to. Okay, and so that is an example of showing how deep things went as far as the disenfranchisement. So I think when you talk about lynching, you have to talk about the different parts that are connected to it. Why is this happening? Why is this violence being perpetuated against African Americans? And most of the time, the perpetrators are receiving no type of acquittal, like they're not being punished or anything like that. They will lie. And, we know about particular lynchings, like the murder of Emmett Till, right? And these things can be very graphic, so to speak, which leads me to my third tip. When you're teaching about lynching, I think sometimes we can overuse media and images and think that we have to show pictures of everything. For me personally, when I taught about lynching this week, I did not show pictures, okay? I didn't have a PowerPoint up where there were pictures of hangings, black bodies, and people. I didn't do that, okay? I actually already planned to not do that, but then I listened to a podcast on teaching hard history, and there were historians on there, Kadita Williams and Kelly Carter Jackson, and they talked about, especially Kelly Carter Jackson talked about maybe limiting those images, and here's why: because they're triggering. Looking at pictures and media of black and brown bodies that are mutilated and, kind of swarmed around and made to be a spectacle, that can be really hard and difficult to look at. So here's what I would say do if you want students to get a visual of what this may have looked like. I've recommended this before, like on my TikTok and stuff like that, you guys. But if you're a teacher, especially US or African American, I highly recommend that you get this PBS Reconstruction series DVD. I have the DVD. I use a portable DVD player because we don't have access to like our Amazon Prime or anything like that anymore at school. But use episode 3 of this because they talk about Ida B. Wells a lot, her efforts to combat lynching. But when they do it, they also do show the visual imagery. They show what it looked like for a black body to be mutilated or hung. They give examples and they provide those things. But, the screen is not just stuck on an image of a black man hanging. And another thing that I want to say is a tip when teaching this. I think throughout my time as both a student and teacher, I've noticed that when we talk about lynching, a lot of the times it can come from the white perspective. And this is also some advice that, I get kind of listening to and reading the works of historians. They say, highlight the black perspective of lynching. Highlight letters written from the families of victims of lynching. Talk about their humanity. These were real people. I told my students this today and yesterday. When we say lynching of African Americans, it just feels so broad to me because these were real people. They were mothers. They were fathers. They were sisters, they were brothers, they had lives. These families of people, African American individuals who were lynched, sometimes they left the South, they moved, they felt like they had to go find justice, and writing letters to their congressman and trying to cope with losing this person in such a humiliating and often publicized way. Lynchings were announced in newspapers like they were, just an event to come to and to attend. We've all maybe seen those images of white mobs surrounding a lynching, and we know that those pictures would be taken and later sent as postcards in the mail, right? When I told my students that, they were like, and it's true, you guys. And so, it's difficult to talk about. I even found myself getting choked up a little bit talking about lynching because, like I said, if we bring that humanity back into talking about the victims of lynching, then we will emphasize that these were people with lives and families that who were greatly impacted from this. Okay, there's Black newspapers. I know the Chicago Defender is really big. You may be able to find some things in there. I'm going to give you guys a couple resources that you can go to also find help with what angle you can take or what resources you can use, primary, secondary, all that good stuff. So that leads to my fifth tip, which is use helpful resources. Like I said before, I absolutely love the podcast Teaching Hard History by Asan Kwame Jeffries. There's always awesome content on there. The one specifically that has helped me a lot in preparing to teach about lynching is called Lynching, White Supremacy, Terrorism, and Black Resilience with Kadita Williams and Kelly Carter Jackson. Excellent podcast to listen to if you're an educator and you feel like you need a little bit more professional perspective and insight about lynching. Go ahead and listen to that episode. I highly recommend it. Also, the Equal Justice Initiative is an awesome resource as well. They have, if you go to lynchinginamerica.eji.org, you will find resources and information about lynching, and they've done an awesome job at breaking them down into different categories and things like that. And then even if you want to, and this is just something extra that our standards do, so I had to talk about it as well. You could talk about the political and justice side of things at the judicial level, about over 200 pieces of legislation that have been introduced to Congress all the way from the 1890s into the present, and nothing had been passed. And still to this day, there's only one thing that almost made it through, and that was actually here, let's see, let me see if I can find the name. Here it goes. In 2018, it's called the Justice for Victims of Lynching Act 2018, unanimously passed in the Senate. But guess what? It died because the bill was not passed by the House before the 115 Congress ended on January 3rd, 2019. Okay, so that bill would have made lynching a federal crime. Still hasn't been passed, guys. All right, so these are not just things of the past that we leave in the past. These are things that are still affecting us. You can still see the lynchings of Black and brown bodies today. Perpetrators getting away scotch-free, and these families that are affected, it's the same thing. So when we have arguments about, oh, that was so negative, students don't need to learn about that, leave it in the past. I don't know who's saying that, but that's not happening in my school. That's not happening in my state standards. We are talking about these things because they need to be talked about, okay? If you don't have a good understanding of the past, you don't understand the present, and I believe that you won't understand where you're going. I'm going to upload another video where I'm going to talk about critical race theory because I know that that's a hot topic right now. So if you are interested in that, then drop me a comment below. Stay on me, make sure I, get that out there. But I hope that, this has been helpful. It is difficult. A lot of these topics are difficult, but, I'm going to try my best in any capacity I can to help other educators feel more equipped to teach this information. My videos are usually a little bit shorter than this. This one is a little long, but I hope it helped. If you want to show your kids certain documentaries like The African Americans, Many Rivers to Cross, or PBS Reconstruction, I have worksheets on my Teachers Pay Teachers page, video worksheets that'll go along with that you can just print and go. So I'll link my Teachers Pay Teachers page down below, so check that out if you get a chance. I got some awesome other movie guides coming as well. But, you know, stay tuned. I'm going to be uploading some different videos throughout the month, especially with Black History Month coming up. I'll be releasing some more content for you guys. So leave me a comment below. Let me know if this was helpful. Let me know what else you want to see, what else you need help teaching, what else you would like for me to kind of go into more detail about. Excuse me, but you guys have an awesome day.